Ladies, if a man ignores you, the worst thing you can do is chase him, beg him, or try to explain your worth. That's exactly what feeds his ego. Silence from a man is not confusion, it's information. And once you understand that, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding strategically. When a man ignores you, it's usually because he believes he has the upper hand. He thinks you're invested more than he is. He assumes you'll reach out, you'll double text, you'll try harder. That belief is where his ego lives. So if you want to destroy that ego, you don't argue with him. You remove yourself from the game. Silence is information. And most people misunderstand it because they are trained to panic when communication stops. When a man ignores you, the instinct is to assume confusion, misunderstanding, or emotional complexity. But silence is rarely unclear. It is a message delivered without words, and the moment you accept that, you stop wasting energy trying to decode what has already been said. Ignoring behavior is a choice, not an accident, and recognizing that shifts you from emotional reaction to awareness. Chasing after silence turns it into power for the person who created it. When you text again, call again, or look for reassurance, you are teaching him that ignoring you has no consequences. It tells him that your time, emotions, and self-worth are flexible and available on demand. Silence, when met with chasing, becomes a tool of control. That's why the first step is not confrontation, but restraint, because restraint removes the reward he expects. Understanding silence as information means you no longer fill in the gaps with excuses for him. You stop saying he's busy, stressed, confused, or unaware. Those assumptions protect his behavior and hurt you in the process. When you accept silence as a decision, you stop personalizing it and start observing it. Observation creates clarity, and clarity removes desperation. When you don't chase, something powerful happens internally. You begin to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. That discomfort is where self-respect is rebuilt. Most people chase because they want relief, not because they lack strength. They want the anxiety to stop. But the moment you allow silence to exist without trying to fix it, you gain emotional control. And emotional control is the foundation of confidence. Silence also reveals priorities. People make time for what matters to them. If someone wants to talk to you, they will. If they want to see you, they will create space. When they don't, the absence tells you exactly where you stand. Accepting that truth may hurt, but it hurts far less than clinging to false hope. Hope without evidence is emotional self-neglect. By not chasing, you also stop negotiating your worth. Every unanswered message followed by another message quietly says, "Please don't forget me." Silence, answered with silence, says, "I don't abandon myself." That shift is subtle but deeply felt, especially by the person who expected access. When he realizes you are not scrambling for his attention, the dynamic changes whether he admits it or not. Silence forces accountability without a single argument. You don't need to accuse, explain, or demand clarity. His actions speak for him, and your response, or lack of one, speaks for you. This is not about punishment, it's about alignment. You align your behavior with your standards instead of your fears. The more you respect silence as information, the less likely you are to tolerate mixed signals in the future. You stop romanticizing inconsistency and start valuing peace. You become someone who listens to actions over words, patterns over promises. That awareness doesn't make you cold, it makes you grounded. When you stop chasing silence, you also stop abandoning yourself. You redirect energy back into your life, your goals, your routines, your sense of identity. You remember that your existence is not dependent on anyone's response time. And in that space, where silence once felt heavy, clarity begins to settle, emotions stabilize, and self-trust grows quietly without needing anyone else to validate it. Removing emotional access is not about being cold or cruel. It is about protecting what should never have been given freely to someone who does not value it. Emotional access means your vulnerability, your reassurance, your availability, your comfort, and your emotional labor. When a man ignores you yet still has access to your feelings, your explanations, and your care, he loses nothing. He gets the benefits of connection without the responsibility of presence. The moment someone shows you that they can disappear and still return to warmth, understanding, and emotional safety, they learn that inconsistency costs them nothing. This is why emotional access must be removed immediately, not slowly, not with warnings, and not with emotional speeches. Access is a privilege, not a right. And privileges are revoked when respect disappears. Removing emotional access starts internally before it shows externally. You stop sharing how much you miss him, how confused you feel, or how deeply his silence affects you. Those emotions are real, but sharing them with the person causing them only reinforces his sense of control. When he knows he still has emotional influence over you, his behavior has no reason to change. Externally, emotional access is removed through calm distance. You respond less, not with anger, not with attitude, but with neutrality. Short responses, delayed replies, and a lack of emotional depth send a clear signal without confrontation. Men often test how much access they still have. And when they realize the door is no longer wide open, it creates a shift they did not anticipate. Removing emotional access also means no longer making him your emotional center. You stop waiting for his messages to determine your mood. You stop replaying conversations in your head, hoping to find meaning. That mental withdrawal is just as important as physical silence. When your emotional energy returns to you, you regain balance and self-respect. Many people fear that removing emotional access will push a man away permanently. What they don't realize is that someone who only stays when they have unlimited access to your emotions was never secure to begin with. Emotional access without effort creates entitlement. Boundaries reintroduce respect. When a man senses that your emotional availability has changed, his ego is challenged. He may feel confused, irritated, or suddenly interested. Not because he suddenly understands your value, but because the dynamic has shifted. What once felt guaranteed now feels uncertain. That uncertainty forces reflection in ways words never could. Removing emotional access is not about manipulation. It is about alignment. You align your emotional investment with the level of effort you receive. When effort drops, access drops. This teaches others how to treat you without lectures or arguments. This process also strengthens you. Each time you choose not to emotionally react, not to overshare, not to seek reassurance from the source of your pain, you build inner discipline. Discipline creates confidence, and confidence changes how people respond to you. Emotional access should be given to consistency, respect, and presence. When those things disappear, access must follow, not as punishment, but as self-protection. The moment you stop offering comfort to someone who withholds connection, you take back the power that was slowly slipping away. And you begin to operate from self-worth instead of emotional need. Becoming unavailable without explanation is one of the most misunderstood yet powerful shifts a woman can make when she realizes her presence is being taken for granted. Many people believe availability equals kindness, loyalty, or emotional maturity. But unchecked availability often communicates a lack of boundaries. When a man ignores you and still has full access to your time, your attention, and your schedule, he learns that your life revolves around his convenience rather than your own priorities. Unavailability does not mean disappearing dramatically or playing games. It means reclaiming your time without offering justification. Explanations invite negotiation, And negotiation weakens boundaries. When you explain why you are busy, why you cannot talk, or why you are stepping back, you are still seeking understanding and approval. True unavailability is calm, natural, and unapologetic. Men who are used to constant access often feel unsettled when that access changes without warning. They expect reasons, excuses, or emotional reactions. When none are provided, it disrupts the pattern they relied on. This disruption forces awareness, not because you said something powerful, but because you stopped giving something they assumed was endless. Becoming unavailable also shifts the power dynamic internally. You stop organizing your day around waiting. You stop keeping emotional space open just in case he reaches out. That mental freedom is just as important as physical absence. When your focus returns to your own life, your energy becomes grounded instead of reactive. Unavailability without explanation also reveals intentions. A man who values you will notice the change and reflect on his behavior. A man who only valued access will react with frustration or entitlement. In both cases, clarity is gained without confrontation. You learn who he is without forcing a conversation he may never take seriously. This approach requires emotional discipline. The urge to explain comes from fear of being misunderstood or forgotten. But when someone consistently ignores you, being misunderstood is not the problem. Being undervalued is. Withholding explanations is not cruelty. It is self-respect. When you are no longer instantly reachable, instantly responsive, or endlessly accommodating, your presence becomes defined by choice rather than habit. Habits are taken for granted. Choices are respected. That shift alone changes how people perceive your value. Unavailability also protects your emotional energy. Every interaction carries weight. When you limit access, you reduce emotional drain. You stop offering your best self to someone giving you their least. That realignment strengthens confidence and emotional stability. Over time, this behavior rewires how you see yourself. You begin to associate your worth with how you treat yourself, not with how someone responds to you. You stop equating attention with value. That inner shift is subtle but powerful. Becoming unavailable without explanation does not guarantee someone will step up, but it guarantees you will no longer shrink. You stop performing availability and start living presence on your own terms. When your time becomes selective and your energy protected, the dynamic changes naturally, and you move from being an option to being a standard. Without saying a word, elevating your life quietly is one of the most effective ways to shift power when someone has ignored or undervalued you. Loud change seeks validation, but quiet elevation comes from certainty. When a man expects you to pause, wait, or emotionally stall because of his absence, choosing to grow instead disrupts that expectation. Growth without announcement is unsettling to those who assumed they were the center of your world. Quiet elevation begins with redirecting energy. Instead of monitoring his behavior, you invest that mental space into your routines, ambitions, health, and personal discipline. This is not done to prove anything, but to realign your life with purpose. When attention moves away from him, emotional dependency weakens, and independence strengthens naturally. There is power in not broadcasting your progress. Social media performances are often driven by a desire to be seen, but true elevation is inward first. When your confidence increases without external applause, it becomes unshakable. A man who once felt secure in your emotional availability begins to sense a shift without understanding where it came from. Elevating quietly also changes your standards. As you improve your life, you become more selective about who has access to you. Your tolerance for inconsistency drops. What once felt exciting now feels draining, and this is not bitterness, it is awareness. Growth sharpens perception. When someone notices you are happier, calmer, and less reactive, curiosity follows. Not because they suddenly value you more, but because you no longer reflect their importance back to them. Ego feeds on attention. When attention disappears and is replaced with self-fulfillment, the imbalance becomes obvious. Quiet elevation also removes the need for revenge or validation. You stop wanting him to regret losing you. You start wanting peace. That emotional shift is what truly changes the dynamic. A person who is no longer emotionally accessible cannot be controlled. As you elevate, your body language, tone, and presence change. You carry yourself with ease instead of urgency. You speak with clarity instead of explanation. These subtle changes communicate self-worth more loudly than confrontation ever could. Elevating quietly also means forming a full life that does not revolve around one person. Strong friendships, meaningful work, personal rituals, and goals create emotional stability. When your happiness is distributed across many areas, no single person can disrupt it easily. This process often triggers delayed interest from someone who once ignored you. They sense that they are no longer needed, and that realization challenges their ego. But by then, your focus has shifted. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are choosing. Quiet elevation is not about winning someone back. It is about winning yourself back. When your growth becomes the priority, emotional clarity follows. You stop asking why someone ignored you and start asking whether they deserve access to the person you are becoming. The most powerful part of quiet elevation is that it does not require permission. It happens regardless of whether anyone notices. And when someone finally does, the dynamic has already changed because you are no longer standing in the same place you were when they left you. Their never rewarding inconsistency is about breaking a pattern that slowly erodes self-respect. Inconsistent behavior often arrives disguised as charm, apologies, or sudden bursts of attention after periods of absence. When a man ignores you and then reappears as if nothing happened, the way you respond determines whether the cycle continues. If he is welcomed back with warmth, explanations, or relief, the inconsistency is reinforced. He learns that disappearance has no real consequence. Inconsistency thrives on emotional forgiveness without behavioral change. Words are used to reset the connection, while actions remain the same. When you reward that pattern, you teach him that effort is optional. You show him that access to you does not require stability, reliability, or accountability. Over time, this creates an imbalance where you adapt to his behavior instead of expecting consistency. Not rewarding inconsistency does not mean confrontation or punishment. It means removing emotional rewards. No excitement when he suddenly texts. No emotional dumping when he returns. No instant availability to reconnect. Calm, measured responses shift the dynamic. They communicate that access to you is linked to behavior, not promises. Many people reward inconsistency because they are focused on potential rather than reality. They hold on to who he could be instead of responding to who he consistently shows himself to be. Letting go of potential is difficult because it feels like giving up hope. But hope without consistency becomes self-betrayal. When you stop rewarding inconsistency, discomfort appears. You may feel tempted to soften, to explain, to restore closeness quickly. That urge comes from fear of loss. But consistency is not created by a fear-driven connection. It is created by standards. Inconsistent men often test boundaries unconsciously. They disappear to see if you will stay emotionally available. They return to see if access is still open. When the response is neutral instead of warm, predictable instead of eager, the test fails. He either adjusts or fades, and both outcomes bring clarity. Refusing to reward inconsistency also protects your nervous system. Emotional highs and lows create anxiety, and attachment confusion. When communication becomes stable or distant but predictable, emotional regulation returns. Peace replaces anticipation. Consistency is not perfection. Everyone has off days, busy periods, or moments of withdrawal. The difference lies in patterns. Inconsistency is not a single absence. It is repeated unpredictability paired with entitlement to reconnection. When you stop excusing patterns, you stop participating in emotional chaos. By not rewarding inconsistency, you also change how you see yourself. You begin to associate love with safety rather than uncertainty. You stop mistaking intensity for intimacy. That shift rewires attraction itself. This boundary does not require announcements. It is enforced through behavior. You no longer overextend when he returns. You no longer prioritize someone who treats you as optional. You meet effort with effort and distance with distance. Over time, this boundary becomes natural. You no longer need to remind yourself not to respond emotionally. It becomes instinctive. You recognize inconsistency quickly and disengage calmly. When inconsistency is no longer rewarded, your standards rise quietly. You begin to expect reliability without asking for it. And anyone who cannot meet that expectation loses access naturally, without drama, without explanation, without emotional debt. Choosing yourself and reclaiming power begins the moment you realize that your worth does not increase or decrease based on someone else's attention. For a long time, many people give others the authority to define how they feel about themselves, especially in romantic situations. When a man ignores you, it can trigger self-doubt, insecurity, and the urge to prove your value. Choosing yourself means stepping out of that cycle and deciding that your peace matters more than his validation. Reclaiming power is an internal decision before it ever becomes visible. It starts with how you speak to yourself when you feel rejected or overlooked. Instead of asking what you did wrong or what you could do better to be noticed, you begin asking why you are accepting behavior that makes you feel small. That shift in questioning changes everything. It moves the focus from pleasing someone else to protecting your own emotional well-being. Choosing yourself also means honoring your feelings without letting them control your actions. You can acknowledge hurt without chasing clarity from someone who refuses to give it. You can feel disappointment without begging for reassurance. Emotional maturity is not the absence of emotion, but the ability to respond with intention instead of impulse. Each time you pause, instead of reacting, you reclaim a piece of your power. When you choose yourself, your boundaries become clearer. You stop tolerating mixed signals, half-effort, and emotional neglect. Not because you are angry, but because you understand that love should not feel confusing or unstable. You begin to recognize that being alone with self-respect is far better than being connected to someone who constantly makes you question your worth. Reclaiming power also means letting go of the need to be chosen. The desire to be chosen keeps you in a waiting position, hoping someone will finally see your value. Choosing yourself removes you from that position entirely. You stop auditioning for attention and start living as if your life is already meaningful and complete. This change is subtle, but it transforms how you carry yourself and how others respond to you. As you choose yourself, your standards naturally rise. You become more selective with your time, energy, and emotional investment. You no longer overgive in the hope of being loved back. Instead, you observe, assess, and respond based on how someone treats you. This creates balance and prevents emotional burnout. Power is also reclaimed when you detach from outcomes. You stop needing a specific person to behave a certain way for you to feel okay. Whether he comes back, apologizes, or disappears completely no longer determines your sense of stability. You become grounded in yourself and that grounding is unshakable. Choosing yourself is not about closing your heart. It is about opening it in the right direction. It is about offering love, effort, and vulnerability to situations that are safe, mutual, and respectful. When you operate from self-worth, you attract healthier connections because you are no longer accepting less. In the end, choosing yourself is the most radical form of self-respect. It restores balance, clarity, and confidence. When you reclaim your power, you stop waiting for someone else to show up and start showing up for yourself every day. And that is when you realize that the attention you were seeking from others was something you had the ability to give yourself all along.